I've always thought that most betrayals don't come in the form of shouting matches or explosive reveals. They come quietly, like a small shift in weight during a hug, or an eye that lingers too long on someone else. Or, on nights like this, when your wife switches champagne glasses and acts like you're the only one imagining things. Madison's birthday party was supposed to be her elevated celebration. In her words, she'd spent months planning it. Private rooftop lounge in downtown Chicago, all dim lighting and sharp angles. Velvet furniture, candlelit corners, a skyline so crisp it felt designed. There was a curated playlist of ambient jazz that she insisted on finalizing herself. Guests were dressed like it was the Met Gala, even though most of us were just co-workers, old college friends, and a few of her newer, sleeker acquaintances from the foundation. It was the kind of party where everything felt too perfect, too orchestrated. I wasn't even supposed to notice the glasses. It was just a blink moment. I'd wandered toward the bar to grab a refill and found two untouched champagne flutes set beside a tray of lemon twists. One of them had a distinct red lipstick mark around the rim, the same red Madison wore, always perfectly applied. The other had the same lipstick smudge, same angle, same faint curve. I stared at them a second too long. That's when she appeared. Like she knew exactly where to find me. Madison had always been observant to the point of unnerving. She could sense tension in a room before anyone else, reroute a conversation before it collapsed, notice a stain on your shirt from a dinner you hadn't even told her about. She was magnetic like that, always composed, always 10 seconds ahead of you. Her wrist brushed mine as she leaned toward the glasses. That's when I smelled it. Cologne. Not the kind I wear. Not something you catch faintly in an elevator or on someone's borrowed scarf. This was sharp, deliberate, the kind of scent that lingers in a car after someone's been in it too long. The kind worn with intention. It was on her wrist like she'd been held. She picked up the glasses without missing a beat. "Ugh," she said with a laugh, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "These waitstaff are mixing everything up tonight." She swapped the two flutes and handed me one. "This one's yours, I think. You hate the dry one, right?" I nodded slowly, even though I couldn't remember which one I'd ordered. Didn't matter. She'd already turned back to the group, flashing her flawless grin, laughing at a story someone was halfway through telling. I was left standing there with a champagne glass that suddenly felt heavier than it should have. It was a smooth move, practiced one. I took a sip. Warm bubbles, bitter at the back. Her lipstick, if it had even been hers, was gone from the rim now. The glasses had been swapped so casually it almost seemed ridiculous to question it. Almost. But something about the timing, the way she stepped in just as I was noticing, how she gave an answer before there was a question. It felt rehearsed. Like this wasn't the first time she'd had to pivot from something incriminating. Like she'd done this exact dance before. With someone else. For someone else. The rest of the night moved forward as if nothing had happened. The toasts were beautiful, of course. Madison looked radiant, floating between clusters of guests with her signature poise, thanking people for coming, accepting compliments on her dress, her glow, her success. Ethan, the foundation's executive director and her boss, gave a little speech about her work ethic and incredible eye for detail. Everyone clapped. Madison pretended to be embarrassed. I watched her blush on cue. I watched Ethan too. He stood near her for most of the night, just off-center. Enough to not seem suspicious to anyone else, but close enough to notice. At one point, I caught a glimpse of his hand on her lower back as they posed for a group photo. Not inappropriate, but not nothing either. I tried not to spiral. This wasn't the first time I'd felt the strange distance between us. The kind you can't explain to anyone without sounding paranoid. I've always been a facts-first kind of guy. I believe in asking directly, not assuming. But tonight, the facts were screaming, and I was the only one pretending not to hear them. Later in the evening, she found me near the balcony. "Hey," she said, smiling like none of it had happened. "Are you okay? You've been kind of quiet." I forced a smile, just taking it all in. "Isn't it beautiful?" she said, looking out over the skyline. "I wanted it to be perfect." "It is," I said, and in a way it was perfect illusion. She leaned in, kissed my cheek lightly, and moved on, back into the crowd, back into her spotlight. But the rest of the night passed like static. Conversations blurred. Faces melted into each other. I smiled when I had to, answered questions, accepted compliments about how lucky I was, how glowing she looked. No one else saw the switch. No one smelled the cologne. No one noticed the choreography. Except me. On the drive home, I kept replaying it in my mind. The glasses, the timing, the scent. I asked myself if I was overthinking, if maybe the lipstick was a coincidence, if maybe the cologne had come from a hug with someone else. But the moment she touched the glasses, her reflex, her explanation, it wasn't defensive. It was protective, like someone covering a crack in the foundation before the inspector arrives. She didn't just react. She anticipated. And the worst part? Everyone else bought it. They laughed. They nodded. They moved on. But I couldn't. I stared at her that night as she undressed, carefully folding her clothes like she always did. She smiled at me in the mirror, oblivious or pretending to be. Then she turned off the light, climbed into bed, and pressed her back against mine. "Love you," she whispered. I said it back. Because I had to. Because saying nothing would have meant opening a door I wasn't ready to walk through. But my eyes stayed open for hours. Not angry. Not yet. Just aware. The illusion had cracked. And I couldn't stop staring through it. After Madison's party, I couldn't unsee it. Not just the glass or the cologne, or the way she deflected with a practiced smile. It was the fact that it all happened so smoothly, like she'd done it before. That's what stuck with me the most. She had a story ready before there was even a question. And once I noticed that, everything else started clicking into place. It didn't happen overnight, but it didn't take long either. Like peeling wallpaper, once the first corner lifts, the rest comes off in sheets. I started noticing things. Small, almost invisible habits that had changed over the past few months. Things I'd brushed off at the time because that's what you do when you trust someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You assume there's a perfectly logical reason why the woman you married now jumps when her phone lights up. It started with her passwords. We'd never been a what's yours is mine kind of couple in a nosy way. But we shared things, our streaming accounts, the grocery list app, the calendar that used to ping both our phones every morning. Madison used to laugh at how bad I was at remembering birthdays and client meetings. "That's why I manage your life," she'd joke. Then one day, I opened our calendar to check something and realized all of her entries were gone. Gone, not just hidden or archived. Her name was still on the account, but her end was blank. Just me and my lonely little dentist appointment reminders. I asked her about it and she waved it off. "Oh, I've just been using my work one more," she said, brushing mascara onto her lashes while barely looking in my direction. Easier to keep everything in one place. I didn't think much of it. She was always busy. Her job demanded a level of detail and discretion I didn't pretend to understand. It made sense that she might consolidate things. But then came the showers. Every time she came home, whether it was from work, errands, or just being out, she went straight to the bathroom. No "hey, babe." No kiss, no lazy plop onto the couch. Just a quick hello. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, and then the sound of the water running. It wasn't just about hygiene. It was urgency. She used to complain about our water pressure. Now she was in there like she was scrubbing something off. Her perfume changed, too. Subtly at first, new floral tones, then earthy ones, then a sharp citrus that clung to her jacket even after she walked away. When I commented on it, she said her old one had been discontinued. I offered to help her find something similar, but she brushed me off. "I like trying new things," she said. "Keeps it interesting." So did her phone habits. I started spending a lot more time face down. Always on silent, always upside down on the table or tucked into the pocket of her coat. She used to show me texts all the time. Funny things her coworkers said. Group chats, photos from work events. Now, whenever it buzzed, she'd pick it up, glance quickly, then type something with her lips pressed tight, like whatever was on the screen was too serious to share. I told myself she was just tired, that work was stretching her thin. I even tried to be better, asked more questions, offered to cook dinner, made reservations to that Peruvian place she'd been talking about. But she kept canceling. "We'll reschedule," she said once. "Next week, I swear." Next week never came. There were excuses layered on top of each other like bricks. Work meetings ran late. Her boss needed her to attend back-to-back events. Out-of-town speakers wanted to connect over dinner. It wasn't that I didn't believe her. It was that she stopped even trying to make it sound believable. Her car barely moved for weeks. We live in a walkable part of the city, but Madison always used to drive when she had long errands or big donor events. I started noticing that her mileage hadn't changed. Same gas level. Same layer of dust on the back windshield. But she'd come home saying she'd been running around all afternoon. Running around where? And with who? I started checking our finances, not in a controlling way, just curious. She has her own cards, a mix of personal and corporate, and we never micromanaged each other's spending. But the pattern started to bother me. Charges from random cafes and boutique hotels. Places I'd never heard of, sometimes in neighborhoods she had no reason to be in. The payments were small, purposefully small, like someone trying not to leave a trail. The statements were fragmented, spread across 3 different accounts, and every charge seemed just under the threshold that would raise a flag. I saw charges from rideshare services that didn't match her claimed destinations. She'd say she took the train downtown, but a receipt would show her being dropped off near the lakeshore. She'd say she worked late, but a payment would ping from somewhere 2 miles from the office, at a time when no one should have been there. And the days themselves, certain days, just felt erased. I couldn't explain it, but there were these stretches of time where she wasn't reachable. She'd claim her phone had died, or she'd been in back-to-back meetings. But her colleagues, the ones I'd met at previous events, would post group photos and tag everyone, except Madison. She'd show up later in the comments with a vague heart emoji, like she was proving she'd been there, even if she wasn't. I wasn't compiling evidence. Not then. I wasn't even angry. I was just trying to understand when the switch happened, when the warmth between us cooled into politeness, when her laugh stopped coming from her stomach and started sounding like a line from a script. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and reach for her, only to find her side of the bed cold. She'd be in the living room, phone in hand, saying she couldn't sleep. She used to crawl back into bed when that happened. Now she stayed out there. I watched her change in front of me, and I convinced myself it was temporary. I told myself we were just in a rut, that couples go through phases, that maybe I'd been working too much, that maybe she needed space, that maybe I wasn't showing up in ways that mattered. I asked her if she was okay, if we were okay. She smiled and said, "Of course, babe, you're just in your head again." That phrase, "you're just in your head again," stuck with me, like I was the crazy one for noticing the gaps, like the evidence wasn't in front of me, slowly assembling itself like pieces of glass from a broken window. I kept trying to convince myself that what I saw wasn't what I saw, that her smell hadn't changed, that her touch hadn't gone cold, that her stories didn't contradict themselves when I listened closely enough. But the thing about instincts is they don't go away. You either drown them in denial or you start listening. And I was done drowning, so I started paying attention. Not obsessively, not with suspicion on a leash, just quietly, like a man walking through his own house with the lights off, feeling the furniture to see what's been moved. I didn't accuse. I didn't confront. I just watched. And what I saw wasn't my wife. It was a stranger rehearsing her lines, perfectly polished but hollow beneath the surface. By the end of the second week, I had a list in my head. Not proof, but patterns. Enough to know I wasn't imagining it. Enough to know that something had shifted. And whatever it wasn't going to shift back. Let me know when you're ready to proceed to part 3. Direct evidence of infidelity, or if you'd like changes to this section first. Absolutely. Here's part 3. Direct evidence of infidelity, expanded to precisely 7,000 characters, continuing the emotional arc of Alex's unraveling discovery. From creeping suspicion to undeniable truth. Part 3, What I Saw in the Corridor. Narrated by Alex. The week after Madison's party was a kind of quiet war. I went about my routines, did my job, smiled when people spoke to me, but under all of that, something had started ticking. Not anger, not yet, just a kind of cold, precise waiting. I wasn't looking to catch her. Not in the dramatic way people expect. I wasn't tailing her through the streets or snooping through her emails. It was more like I had resigned myself to a fact I couldn't name yet, and I was just waiting for reality to stop pretending. And then it did. She had a foundation event that Friday night. Board closed, high-level, black tie kind of thing, as she described it. The kind of event where spouses weren't needed, maybe even inconvenient. I didn't ask twice when she told me she'd be going alone. I acted understanding, supportive. She even thanked me for being cool about it. But the truth was, I'd already decided I was going. Not to accuse, not to corner her, just to see for myself what existed when I wasn't supposed to be looking. The venue was a downtown cultural center, modern, angular architecture and harsh lighting against brushed concrete walls. I knew the place. We'd been to a donor gala there once 2 years ago. I arrived early, told the check-in staff I was there to surprise Madison, and they smiled like I was some devoted husband trying to rekindle romance. "She's not on the guest floor yet," one of them said. "Still downstairs, I think. Prep wing?" I nodded like I understood what that meant. And then I went looking. The prep corridors were mostly staff, caterers, tech guys, floral teams moving centerpieces into place. I wandered past them, a suit blending into a sea of black button-ups. Nobody questioned me. If you look like you belong, you usually do. And that's when I saw it. At the end of a hallway lit by overhead fluorescence. No music, no guests, no chatter. There they were. Madison and Ethan. They were standing close. Too close. He had one hand on the wall behind her, the other resting against her waist, half shielded by the sleeve of her blazer. Her hands were on his chest. Her head tilted upward. Eyes locked on his face like he was the only man in the world. There was no kiss. Not that second. But everything else was already there. The kind of closeness that comes from practice. From habit. From repetition. I froze. I didn't speak. Didn't move. One of the staff, a young guy holding a bundle of napkins, rounded the corner behind me and paused too. His eyes darted from me to them and then quickly away. He saw what I saw. We both did. And just like that, the moment was over. Madison caught my reflection in the polished metal door behind Ethan's head. She flinched, barely, and then stepped back from him like nothing had happened. She adjusted her blazer, smoothed her hair, and turned toward the hallway with the same smile she used on donors. "Alex," she said brightly, like this was a pleasant coincidence. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was steady, but I saw it. The panic behind her eyes. The split-second calculation. Ethan turned too. He looked caught. Not guilty. Just inconvenienced. Like someone whose meeting had been interrupted. I didn't answer her. I didn't answer him. I didn't make a scene. I just turned and walked away. I heard her call my name once. Maybe twice. But I didn't stop. I passed the staff, the floral team, the wide-eyed napkin kid. I walked straight out the front doors and didn't look back. Some part of me had still been hoping, however quietly, that I was wrong, that I was projecting, that I'd misread everything. But standing in that corridor, under that sterile white light, with no party music to drown it out, I saw the truth. It didn't need to be said. It was in the way she looked at him when she thought no one else could see. The ride home was silent. I didn't blast music or speed through yellow lights. I just drove. Streetlight after streetlight passed over me like waves. I pulled into our driveway but didn't go inside right away. I sat in the car with my hands on the wheel and stared at our house. The one we picked out together, the porch she wanted for morning coffee, the guest room she said would be for someday. All of it felt borrowed now. When she came home, she didn't talk about the event. She acted like nothing had happened. Said she was tired. Said the speakers went long. Gave a rehearsed yawn and went upstairs to shower. She smelled like Ethan's cologne. She'd changed into different clothes before coming home, something casual, something unremarkable. But I recognized that scent now. It wasn't the first time I'd caught it. I just hadn't known where to place it before. I didn't confront her. Not that night. Not the next day. Why? Because I knew something she didn't. The truth wasn't going anywhere. And if this was her secret, she'd already given me permission to dig. But that moment in the corridor? That was it. That was the shift. The break in the glass. Because everything up until then, every suspicion, every little lie, every vanishing calendar invite, had a margin for doubt. A sliver of maybe. But seeing them like that, framed by the hum of fluorescent lights and the flicker of guilt in her eyes, that was the truth. And no one, not even Madison, could rewrite it. The thing about discovering a betrayal is that, after the shock, something colder takes its place. People imagine rage, shouting, confrontation. But that's the movies. In real life, it's quiet, almost serene. You start moving differently, thinking differently. You stop reacting. You start collecting. That's what I did. After that night at the foundation, I didn't bring it up. I didn't mention Ethan. I didn't even change my tone with her. Madison was expecting the explosion, the tearful argument, the how could you, the long night of truth and damage control. She'd rehearsed for that, I think. But when it didn't come, she didn't know what to do. I stayed calm. I kissed her on the forehead in the morning, asked about her day, acted like everything was fine. That calmness bought me time. And time was what I needed. The first step was digital. Madison had always been meticulous with her devices, but she wasn't as careful as she thought. Years ago, when she started consulting with the foundation, I'd helped her set up a cloud account, shared admin privileges, backups for her presentations and reports. She must have forgotten that I still had an old administrator key stored in a personal folder. One night, while she was in the shower, I found it. I logged in. The screen loaded slowly, a small spinning wheel at the center like a heartbeat. Then it opened thousands of files neatly categorized by project and date. I wasn't sure what I was looking for at first, but the deeper I went, the clearer it became. There were folders named after cities: Seattle, Denver, Austin. Inside them, travel receipts, hotel confirmations, car rental invoices. Each trip had two versions of the same itinerary. One under her name, one under a different account, booked minutes apart. Each with a male guest added in the notes field. The names weren't visible, but the pattern was undeniable. The photos came next. Unfamiliar apartments. Modern, minimal, staged but lived in. I recognized Madison's clothes, her jewelry, the coffee mug she'd bought on our trip to Carmel. But the rooms weren't ours. And in the corner of one mirror, I saw it. A man's hand holding a phone. No face, just the reflection of his cuff and wristwatch. Gold, expensive, corporate-looking. The kind Ethan wore. The timestamps lined up perfectly with the work trips she'd taken in the last 6 months. It was strange how clinical it felt. There wasn't a cinematic rush of emotion. No single moment where I broke. It was just information. Cold, unshakable, complete. But she hadn't just hidden her infidelity. She'd engineered it. There were documents, meticulous ones. Budgets, meeting notes, schedules labeled project overlap. Each file contained subtle edits. Names redacted, participants deleted, timestamps rewritten. She'd been constructing alibis in real time. In one spreadsheet, there were 3 separate entries under conference allocation, all pointing to the same weekend, billed to different departments. A layering effect, obvious once you knew what to look for. Her phone, though, that was trickier. She'd recently set up facial recognition, but I didn't need access to read patterns. The new app downloads told their own story. Encrypted messaging services, 2-step verifications under her maiden name, and a duplicate cloud link leading to a private drive. That one was harder to breach, but she'd used the same backup email as the old account. I mirrored it overnight. The messages weren't long. They weren't emotional. They were logistical, like 2 professionals planning something far bigger than an affair. 9A window. Same layout as Denver? Use corporate rate. Split later. Confirm quiet check-in. There were also deleted drafts of longer emails. I recovered them through cache data. Explanations, excuses, timelines. One of them read like a script for a confrontation that hadn't yet happened. Alex deserves clarity when it's official. Don't make him the villain before the lease stabilizes. It hit me harder than the photos did. Not because of what it meant, but because of how precise it was. The emotional distance wasn't accidental. It was staged, planned, part of a transition. She wasn't just betraying me personally. She was preparing to replace me logistically. The payments were the final proof. I traced them across 3 accounts: her personal card, her corporate one, and something else. A digital wallet under her maiden name, Madison Avery. The transactions were carefully fragmented. Small payments spread across different vendors, each under $50. Enough to stay under any automatic fraud alert. Together, they built a map of travel, meals, and stays that perfectly matched Ethan's own speaking schedule, which was public on the Foundation's website. Same dates, same cities, same rhythm. Every breadcrumb led to the same destination. By the time I finished cataloging it all, the clock on my laptop read 3:17 a.m. Madison was asleep upstairs, curled on her side like always, her phone charging beside her. I looked at her and felt nothing. No hatred, no heartbreak. Just the stillness of someone finally seeing the edges of a picture they've been too close to. That's when the clarity came. This wasn't an accident or a lapse in judgment. It was infrastructure. Layers of deceit built like architecture. Foundation, walls, facade. The emotional affair, the distance, the late nights. It had all been part of something larger. And I realized something else. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was building something new. The files hinted at a shared project, drafts of business plans under a joint name, Haven and Company. I didn't know what it was yet, but the language was corporate, subscription models, market projections, design proposals for creative community spaces. It looked legitimate, but every document was connected to her Foundation accounts, and half of them used company templates. She'd been funding her affair through her employer, quietly, systematically, for months. By dawn, I'd copied everything, photos, receipts, messages, drafts, onto an encrypted flash drive. I labeled it with the date and nothing else. I hid it in my office under a false bottom drawer. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Not until I understood the full scale of what I was holding. Because this wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was fraud. It was planning. It was a blueprint for a life that didn't include me. And she thought she'd built it in secret. But now, for the first time, I was the one watching her rehearse, and I wasn't blinking. I used to believe betrayal was int asterisk mate. Quiet. A knife between ribs, not on a spreadsheet. But sitting alone in my office that Sunday, watching Madison's second life unfold in front of me in PDFs and branded slide decks, I realized something much colder. This wasn't personal. It was business. The folders were buried inside her drive. Not hidden, just misnamed. Tucked into a folder labeled Q2 Regional Outreach, the subdirectory was called Haven Drafts Archive. At first glance, it looked like just another internal campaign. But once I opened the files, the branding told a different story. Haven and Company. It was clean, beautiful even, a soft serif logo, muted sand and sage color palette. Taglines like, "Where art finds belonging," and "Curated spaces, creative lives." It wasn't a side hustle. It wasn't a passion project. It was a full-fledged company in development. LLC documents, financial projections, tenant models, lease agreements, even a beta website mostly finished with bios. One of the bios was hers. Another was Ethan's. They were listed as co-founders, equal partners. The copy praised their shared vision of an artistic economy and 10 years of combined leadership in cultural innovation. I scanned their bios like I was reading obituaries for people I thought I knew. Madison's even used her married name, Madison Shaw, followed by a footnote that read, "Currently consulting, transitioning to full-time creative director post-launch." Post-launch. They weren't leaving their jobs yet, just waiting for the lease to stabilize. I didn't even know what that meant until I found the documents. They had secured riverfront properties. 3 leases signed under Haven and Company, 1 still pending. Renovations already in progress. Budgets approved, vendors contracted, marketing slated to roll out in Q1. She had diverted funds from her department's discretionary spending, tiny amounts but consistent. Furniture purchases, venue deposits, client experience research, all routed through the foundation, tagged as pilot programming. I looked at the invoices and saw the deception laid bare. 1 chair, 3 vendors. 1 dinner, split across 2 cards and labeled as a donor engagement. A $1,200 creative consultant fee billed to community activation. A line item that, in the foundation's budget, didn't exist until 6 weeks prior. Madison had invented an entire department to cover a payment. That was the scale. It wasn't just about a man. It wasn't about late-night messages and stolen hotel hours. It was about Madison building a new ecosystem, social, emotional, financial, and designing me out of it. Quietly, smoothly, with the same detail and care she once used to plan our anniversary trips. At the bottom of 1 doc, handwritten in her cursive I used to love, was a sticky note. Don't tell Alex until the lease stabilizes. Wait until Q3 projection clears. Not talk to him. Not discuss it. Just don't tell him. Like I was a risk she needed to manage. I stared at that sentence for a long time. It was the first time I let myself feel the full weight of it. Not just the hurt, the insult. I wasn't a partner. I wasn't even an obstacle. I was a loose end. Something to be handled with timing and paperwork. I clicked through another folder, internal brand decks. They'd hired a design firm, one I recognized from Madison's own vendor list at the foundation. They were paid through a pilot collaboration grant. But the pitch was clearly for Haven. It included target demographics, rent modeling, tiered subscription options. Things like studio tier, $300 per month access to shared gallery, weekly programming. Collector tier, $600 per month private showings, early acquisitions, concierge events. Founder tier, $1,000 plus per month naming rights, curated experiences, corporate leasing. It wasn't just a place for artists. It was a lifestyle product, a luxury asset disguised as community support. Madison wasn't creating something new. She was copying the same exclusionary model she'd spent years criticizing, just with better lighting and more artisanal cocktails. There were even test scripts for interviews. 1 slide had pre-drafted answers for hypothetical questions. Question: is this a romantic partnership too? We met through work, but Haven has been built on professionalism and mutual respect. Our commitment is to the mission. I almost laughed. They'd already prepared their damage control, anticipated the narrative, crafted their myth. But they didn't anticipate me seeing it. Not yet. That gave me power. There's a kind of clarity that only comes when the mask drops completely. When someone finally shows you what they've been building behind your back. That clarity changes how you move. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt focused. Madison came home late that evening. She walked in carrying a to-go bag and humming to herself. I was sitting on the couch, files hidden, face calm. "Hey," she said, kissing the air next to my cheek. "Sorry, I grabbed Thai. You want some?" I looked up at her like she was a stranger. She hadn't even showered yet, but the scent of that same cologne clung to her blouse. "No, I'm good," I said. She smiled. "Long day. You have no idea." She walked to the kitchen, oblivious to the fact that everything was already unraveling. And I didn't stop her. Why would I? Because now I knew what she didn't. That this wasn't about saving a marriage. It wasn't even about betrayal. It was about exposure. I spent the next several nights pulling everything into order. Screensh *TS with timestamps. Original file metadata. Side-by-side comparisons of documents. 1 version for the foundation, 1 for Haven. Expense reports, rideshare logs, overlapping payment structures. I even started mapping Ethan's public travel schedule against Madison's conflicts from our shared calendar before she deleted it. They matched almost perfectly. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an archivist. Every new file was a puzzle piece clicking into place. Every message a dot on the map. The betrayal had been upgraded from personal to operational. And that meant my response had to be strategic, too. I started backing everything up in triplicate. One flash drive hidden at home. One kept at the office. One encrypted cloud mirror, password protected, stored in a dead email account I hadn't used in 5 years. Just in case. Because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about the company, the money, the fraud, and the public perception they'd built. 2 visionary leaders creating something noble from the ashes of burnout. That image was fragile. And I had the hammer. The night before I contacted the lawyer, I found one last document. An email draft addressed to Ethan. It was never sent. But the subject line read, Phase 3, Rollout plus Next Steps, Personal. Inside it was short. I'm scared. About the fallout. About Alex. We need a plan if this goes public sooner than we expect. Let's talk Tuesday. There it was. Fear. Madison wasn't as confident as she looked. There was still a thread of uncertainty in her voice, even in a draft. She knew there was risk. She just didn't know it was already sitting in the living room with her, sipping tea, cataloging her new life file by file. And maybe that was the worst part. Not that she'd lied. Not that she'd planned it. But that she'd thought I'd never find out. She thought I was just the guy in the background of her new chapter. Placeholder. An ending. But now I was the story. I gathered everything, files, receipts, timestamps, and built a timeline. I met with a lawyer, froze our joint accounts, and submitted a formal complaint to the foundation about Madison's fund misuse. Quietly, I sent Ethan's wife a copy of the evidence. No accusations, just facts. The truth didn't need help. It only needed air. At the next charity dinner, I arrived with Ethan's wife. We handed over the dossier, photos, payments, and proof of Haven and Company. In minutes, the room turned. Investors backed out. Audits began. Madison's image collapsed under the weight of her own architecture. I walked away. She was left with the ruins. Plans built on lies now open for all to see.